We're back! Oh my god, we are finally back. Hey, guy. Oh, look at that. That's really pretty. Painterly. It's painterly. Anyway, hey, last episode we kind of played ball with Campbell, right? We played the Campbell game and saw what we could see by doing that. The time will come when I rip him a new one again, and that'll be great. But for now, we're going to leave that alone for the most part, and I'm just going to kind of talk about how the game delivers its narrative. It's got kind of a unique way of doing that, which heavily involves the level design, I think more so than most games. So speaking of, this is Firelink Shrine. It's a ruined old church, which is significant. So let's explore, pick up the pickups, meet the faces. First stop is this guy, Petrus of Thurland. He's another cleric in our same religion, actually, the Way of White. He doesn't really trust us. He's not a very important character in the scheme of things, but he's kind of important to understanding our character because, you know, we share a religion. And just this scene has a lot of gravity to it, right? These two clerics standing in this ruined old church talking to one another distrustfully. It's worth remembering that Hamlet wasn't always going to be a cleric. He's a member of the Way of White because I decided it would make for a satisfying narrative in this series. Petrus is only going to give us the barest of information about what he's doing here. But I have some foreknowledge about it, and it makes sense that Hamlet would know about the Way of White's business here too. That's really the hidden strength of the silent video game protagonist, is that the player is free to assign him any knowledge and any motivation he wants. I have some measure of control over the drama here, and I'm even free to change my mind about it later. The game won't push back against me. Of course, the fact that I'm recording a video series with an eye towards the narrative means that I am obliged to make sure there's a contiguous dramatic arc for Hamlet, and we're gonna dig into that a little bit here. First of all, we are a cleric, and this is actually going to be reflected in the gameplay. Petrus tells us the first few miracles here. They're one of the 3 schools of magic, essentially, in this game, and so we are going to be making use of these at some point. Sorry, there's going to be some weird cuts here because I didn't really have this episode's structure planned out when I recorded the gameplay. But check this out. If we go over here and go down here, it's kind of a secret area where we can find some of Petrus's stuff. And this is the level design speaking to us right now. This is a gesture in the level design. It's curious to begin with that Petrus has a hiding place for his stuff. And it's a safe bet that this is Petrus's stuff because of that talisman. That's what you use for casting miracles. And oh, a cracked red eye orb. That's bad. Only a bad person would have this. It's used to do violence. This chest here, though, has some homeward bones in it. These are a useful item, but I think its presence here speaks the most clearly to what I believe Petrus's motivations are. Let's take a look at its item description. Every item in the game has one of these, and they're pretty fun. They are what the lore meisters like to pour over. So what we've got here is a bone fragment reduced to white ash, returned to last bonfire, used for resting. So that right there is kind of just a description of its gameplay utility. But then we got bonfires are fueled by the bones of the undead. In rare cases, the strong urge of their previous owners to seek bonfires enchants their bones with a homeward instinct. Oh yeah, there's a misplaced apostrophe there. That made me stumble a little. But anyway, my goodness, that seems to be some irrelevant information. What can we do with that? Well, we can extrapolate. It's established elsewhere that in the theocratic state of Thurland, Hamlet and Petrus's homeland, the undead are considered a scourge, and they're hunted down by clerics wielding divine weapons. So it makes sense that Petrus, seemingly a high-ranking member of the church, would have those red eye orbs. They're used by players to maliciously invade one another's games as enemies, suggesting that Petrus still enjoys the occasional undead hunt, you know, in his spare time. The thing is, he's undead himself. When a member of the church becomes undead, they're sent here to Lordran on ritualistic missions, which are very possibly intended to be futile. Petrus is here to facilitate one such mission. If it succeeds, it might keep the all-important flames burning a little longer, but this would be prolonging the inevitable. Only the prophesized chosen undead can reset the apocalypse clock, and maybe the church hopes that one of its missions to Lordran will achieve that purpose. But Petrus, well, whether Hamlet understands the significance of Petrus's secret stash or not, I think he can tell. Petrus is just like that homeward bone. He is dead flesh who just wants to go home. He's no savior, not like us. He's not ready to fight skeletons. He's just some guy whose faith is, to be poetic about it, just as shattered as this church where he finds his refuge. Ow. Ow. You're actually not supposed to, well, it's not that you're not supposed to, but these skeletons are intentionally very difficult at this early stage in the game. They're kind of a signal to come back to this part later. I managed to take him on, though. I'm good. Hamlet is good at fighting for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe we'll figure out an explanation for that. So what I just did, painting that little portrait of Petrus as a man of broken faith whose prayers that he be allowed to leave the Holy Land go terrifyingly unanswered. That was the kind of thing you would see in all those Dark Souls lore videos that were popular for a while after this game came out. A cool thing about this game is that it permits that activity, the act of creatively reading the game, putting the pieces together into new shapes. I like those videos. As I said earlier, they're a really fun and kind of fresh form of fan work, but it did disappoint me slightly that the best of them were received as like the gospel truth of Dark Souls' story, you know, the puzzle plot solved once and for all. I prefer to think of this game's narrative as multivalent, flexible depending on what you want to get out of it and what you want to do with it. And what I'm trying to do with it, or at least one of the things I'm trying to do with it, is build a story about faith. Hamlet is the opposite of Petrus. His faith is indomitable, and that's what's going to get him through this. He's in the land of the gods, for God's sakes. He doesn't need a church. So with that in mind, let's leave this church for a second and go on a little detour. This is going to give us a peek at a late game area. The enemies here, or at least the bulk of them, are non-corporeal ghosts, even more vexing than the skeletons. I'm just passing through it as part of the new game ritual to collect all the nearby useful stuff. But one of the bewildering things about this game's level design is that the different areas really are connected in exactly the way they appear. That elevator really did just take us down below Firelink into a space where this ruined city fits snugly amidst the entire rest of the game world. It doesn't cheat. That's almost unheard of in this kind of corridor crawling game. It's almost sculptural. It's like Russian Ark, a film which was all done in a single long take. And I could talk about how cool that is all day. By the way, here you can see the sun peeking through the cave wall. Funny thing about the sun is you can see it from almost anywhere. Keep the sun in mind, it's important. Anyway, the spatial contiguity of this game may be pretty cool, but it has a real effect on the impression this space creates. It invests the world with a sense of baggage. These places aren't just connected spatially, but historically, narratively, you know? The other thing the connected world allows us to do is go really far afield. Like here we're in a space between the 6th, approximately, and one of the final bosses. We're just here to pick up a particular sword, which is in the clutches of this undead dragon over here. So, we've seen a ruined church, a buried city, and an undead dragon. What can we deduce from the presence of all three of these things? Well, the fact that something has happened. Yeah, I'm definitely about to die. That's fine. We get to keep the sword, and dying will take us back to the bonfire in Firelink. For those keeping track, I made another trip down there to get the tiny amount of money I was carrying, and then I went a little further into New Londo to get this Firekeeper soul, and I died again. And in case you were wondering what this really weird lady from before was all about, she can use that Firekeeper soul to make my healing item better, blah blah blah. Let's just stop playing the game for a minute, because I want to take a moment to really talk about Firelink Shrine. Ruined church in the Holy Land. I mean, this is really the realm of the gods, right? It's got a Mount Olympus thing going on. The mortal world is imperceptibly distant, right? Thorland, you know, with its theocracy and its undead hunts, that's all down there. We're high above. We're inside the Holy of Holies. And this very site is a place of worship, and it's ruined. Better yet, nature is starting to reclaim it. Earlier I mentioned that we can deduce from the appearance of these places that something has happened. And that sounds tautological, but not really, not in this world. One of the first things we learned about this place is that its previous age was static. This ruined church stands as evidence that this age of fire hasn't been one of stasis at all. A church has been ruined, a city has been flooded, things are changing. It could just be passing architectural trends, but the spreading of an undead curse suggests there's a little more to it. The Age of Fire is suffering from a little entropy problem, and we're going to see signs of it just about everywhere we visit. So there's this conversation taking place between the backstory and the world as we get to explore it. The background lore is important, and it's really neat how the item descriptions tend to speak to the places where you find the items, but I think the level design and that old cliché environmental storytelling is Dark Souls' fundament. It's the stone from which this thing was carved. The story wouldn't carry nearly so much weight if it weren't for the, dare I say it, immersive way you encounter it. In other words, the item descriptions aren't the load-bearing feature here. You could cut them out of the game entirely, and there would still be intrigue and drama inherent in these environments. Was this shrine built on top of that city after the earth somehow swallowed it up, or were they abandoned at the same time? Was that city built in a cave? How did it get flooded? Investigating the story will turn up likely answers at best to some of those questions, but not all of them. So, no matter how well acquainted with this game's narrative you get, these environments will always be invested with a healthy sense of mystery, which keeps the world feeling alive and allows the parameters of the story to feel almost infinite. And I've seen that in books, I've seen that in movies, I've seen it in other games. It's not unique, it's just really cool, pretty impressive. So anyway, the last thing I want to talk about here is the sun. It's present here too, you see it, occluded by the leaves of that giant tree, almost like it's being kept at bay. The sun is at the center of Hamlet's religion, and in the game's cast of visual symbols, it's the central character. It represents Gwyn, remember him? He had the Lord Soul which held power over light. It turns out he became the head honcho of the Age of Fire, and this whole place is his domain. One of this game's cool tricks, which I think goes overlooked a lot of the time, is its use of the sun as a symbol. Most of this game's environments can tell us something about Gwyn if we look at the sun. This one back in New Londo is a very clear example. It's like Gwyn is keeping a cautious eye on this city, like it's a place he fears. Firelink's sun is a little more ambiguous. It's interacting with a second symbol, the tree, which is hard to untangle. In the introduction, gigantic arch trees were a feature of the timeless dragon world. Could this tree have grown up from those eternal depths? Maybe the symbolic tableau here represents that great primordial something, reaching out of the past to smother Gwyn's light and return the world to its original emptiness. It's tempting to say that if we can learn more about the historical significance of this particular church, then it might get easier to read the symbol language more clearly, but here is the great feature of being in a world of myth. There are real forces behind the way the sun and the tree appear. They're not here as decoration to signify the higher themes of this place. These are the very forms of the world, moving according to their desires. Gwyn, for reasons we maybe don't yet know, is yearning for this spot, but some force of nature, something older, deeper, and more powerful than him, frustrates his grasp. I'm channeling Joseph Campbell here. But this would also be the way Hamlet sees the world. He's come to this place with his eyes wide open, and I think he would be rapturously happy to have this chance to become an instrument of his faith. Petrus, also up close and personal with this grandiose divinity everywhere, seems to shrink away in fear. Ironically, a church in heaven is a place where you can hide from God, enjoy the shade of symbol and ritual instead of confronting the holy light itself. Hamlet, on the other hand, is ready to go confront it, and it's going to lead him down that road of trials. So the sun, trees, birds, light, dark, death, these are omnipresent features of the world we live in. Jung called them motifs. Understanding them was important to ancient peoples, so of course they constructed symbol languages around them. There's a practical reason why a culture does that. It helps them pass on the knowledge of how to navigate the world. It creates social strictures which maintain order. Such mental models would have to be where the collective unconscious was born. For Campbell, that mythological world also had an aesthetic value we're now missing in the modern world. He reckons that for ancient people, the world was this cast of all-encompassing characters whose interactions were codified in our unconscious. And Dark Souls, with lovely attention to detail, creates a world which plays by those rules. That's what makes its setting so powerful. So now we just have to figure out what it takes to thrive here. Next time we'll kick this adventure off properly, go slash some zombies. It'll be fun. Catch you later. This episode took way too long to make. You might have noticed. I'm sorry if you've been waiting. Thanks for still being here. I blame it on the summer heat, but that's a feeble excuse. I'm going to give myself a deadline. The next one will be up in 2 weeks. Hopefully.